Hey, welcome to another episode of the Program Beach Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Stevenson, and today we're here with Louise Arseneault, a speaker, writer, avid traveler, and beach soccer player, here to discuss certain aspects of her life. Hello, Louise. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for
So
having
first, I
me.
kind of want to talk about your book, The Blackout. It's a story that follows a young girl as she suffers through the hardship and is at the mercy of fate. As she learns to follow her instinct on a journey towards personal growth and friendship, and it's a novel inspired by true events. We encourage anyone listening or watching to go check it out. I kind of don't want to give away all the details about it, but what was your inspiration while writing this novel?
Yeah, so this is a little bit funny, but it is based on a true event of a story that happened to me. In 2003, I was 14 at the time. I was traveling across the country from New Brunswick, Canada, my hometown. And for those of you who don't know where that is, that's above Maine. And then I was traveling all the way across Canada to British Columbia. And I had spent some time there. And on my way back, I had a layover. And at the time, there was no cell phones. Again, I was traveling on my own. And there's a big blackout that happened. So 55 million people were affected, no electricity, no way to reach home. So, what do you do type situation. But I ignore some of my fears, trusted my intuition. And there's a family that kind of took me in, and it's a story about that, ignoring fears, trusting your intuition. And every chapter of the book has a little bit of a life lesson. I'm not going to give it all away as well, but that's kind of what inspired me to write that book. But it only published 16 years later. So the funny thing about that, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about all this later, but I was in Finland at the time playing pro, and I just never realized that there was so much downtime when you're playing professional soccer. And I had read all of the English books out of the small English section of the library. So then I decided, it was always something that I wanted to do. And I decided, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write 300 to 500 words a day. I'm going to write my own story. And that's what I came out with.
So you mentioned that it took you about 16 years to get the book together. Were there any challenges while writing The Blackout, or any trouble getting the book published at all?
Yeah, so it took 16 years, meaning I didn't start writing about it until 16 years later. So while I was in Finland, it took me about just under a year to kind of write the manuscript. And then after that, there's just a whole slew of things that need to occur for a book to be published that I didn't even know about. So of course you need to send it to an editor or somebody to edit your book, and then you have to approve those changes. And then after that, you have to find a book cover, and you have to do all of these extra steps. So for me, I went the self-publishing route. So there's definitely obstacles and challenges that come with that, because, or any realm, to be honest, but if you kind of educate yourself and you learn and you talk to people, the book writing community is super open and they want to help. So for me, one of the challenges was figuring out a company that could publish and that was Canadian, and that could be a self-publishing company. So I went with one that was based out of Canada. So that was something that I held that was valued to me. So that's one of the things that I did that I found a little bit challenging to find. The other challenge is that they tell you that once your book is written, you've only done 5% of the work. Well, I don't know if you know, but I did not believe that. I just was like, no way, because you just put so much work and so much time and so much effort in what you're doing. And once the book was written, I realized that they were correct, because then comes the editing, then comes the book, all of these things. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but it was a fun, challenge of growth. And I think that it was definitely well worth it. And I'm proud of the work that I've put forth.
So where can our viewers find a copy? Again, I want to emphasize that anyone listening to this or watching this, that you go check this book out.
Yeah, so they can find it on my website at louisearseneault.com. So that's Louise Arseneault, Arseneault.com. You can find it directly on Instagram, on Amazon. So you can find it on Amazon.com and .ca, and all the extended distribution as well. You can just type in my full name, or if you type in The Blackout, a novel inspired by true events, it should come up.
And again, I want to encourage our viewers, please go look at her website to go find the book, because there's a lot of other stuff besides the book on her website. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? These sections of your life really on your website.
Yeah, so the website there's a little bit of a slew of everything on there. There is my website. There's a coaching page. I run an online juggling program for kids. So that helps them. It's a bilateral systematic approach to juggling. So it helps them increase, their first touch, their reaction time, and of course, their overall juggling count. There is a version of that program for regular soccer players, 11 aside. And because now I'm a beach soccer player, there's a version also for beach soccer. I'm also a speaker, so I like to go in schools and I do talks about all sorts of things. It's like attitude, perception, those kinds of topics, dreaming and pursuing your dreams. So there's also info on my website on that. So I just kind of made it a one-stop shop instead of having a few different pages. So yeah.
So you mentioned you're from New Brunswick, Canada. How did you, we talked a little bit before, how did you end up at the University of Mobile and Mississippi College?
That's a good question. So again, growing up out here, my first language is French. Not that it has anything to do with me going to the University of Mobile, but because it is a small town, there was a gentleman by the name of Remy Roy. He was a little bit older than us and than me, and he ended up working at the University of Mobile. And he would come down during his winter breaks and he would give clinics or things of the sort. And I went to one of his clinics and he thought I was good enough and he asked if I wanted to go on basically like a university visit. And I didn't disagree because I was like, where is it at? And he said, Alabama. I was like, well, I've never been to Alabama. I love traveling. I was like, let's go. Didn't think anything of it, didn't have any expectations. But once I went there, fell in love with the place, fell in love with the people, the program, and I came back home with a scholarship. So I accepted and I decided to go and spend all my 4 years at the University of Mobile.
And for those who don't know, why I'm smiling so hard is because I'm from Alabama. So here she went to college down here. I attended the university down here as well. So it was really interesting to see how she ended up here. And that's why I'm smiling so hard. So how was the change of scenery and culture?
It was definitely different. I think that Southern hospitality is a real thing. The culture is different, but you grow to learn some of the things that are stereotypical of the country, of the state, essentially, I should say. So I learned to love sweet tea, and when I go back and I visit, I love to have biscuits and gravy. But the culture was fine. I think that the school that I went to had a lot of diversity in terms of, on my team, there were people from Iceland, there were people from Scotland, there are people from Norway. So I got to play with a lot of international players as well. So it wasn't like I was full blown into the Alabamian culture, so to speak, but there was definitely some flavor of the sort, but there was a lot of diversity too of other countries.
Real quick, what is your favorite thing that you tried from down here?
Oh man, favorite thing that I tried. I think I would have to say the sweet tea. Not at first, but like it's something that when I go back now, I'm like, oh yeah, I need a cup of sweet tea, but with like the Alabama style with like so much ice, Yeah.
That's really interesting because I talked to a lot of people from California, and well, I had a cup of sweet tea from California, and it wasn't sweet at all. But you gotta really get the sugar in there, and they say they don't like sweet tea.
That's called iced tea. That's different. It's not sweet tea.
So let's go back a little. You kind of mentioned this before, the Northeast Blackout. Can you tell me and the audience who haven't been through something like that a little bit more about that?
So the event itself was, at the time, it was ranked the biggest blackout in Northeastern history, but 55 million people were affected. So just in the blink of an eye, no electricity, no air conditioning, no nothing. And it just so happened that at that time, it was a particularly hot time during California, Canada time. So that means that everything was amplified. Everything was kind of like worsened. So anybody that kind of goes through something like that, the traffic lights aren't working, like all the restaurants, like nothing is keeping the food cold, like everything is, only the people that had generators had some success. So it's just an environment where, for most Canadians, they took advantage of it and they called it the blackout party. So people would just barbecue on the side of the road and just having a good time and sharing what they had so that like stuff in their fridge didn't go bad, right? So for some people, the lack of electricity lasted 2 to 3 days, and some people it lasted 7 to 8. So it just depended on where you were. But for me, it took me about 3 or 4 days before finally getting home.
So did you see a lot of people making the best out of the situation? Like you mentioned, people having fun?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that, you know, it was what it was, and there's nothing they could have done to change. It's not anything that they can control, so people just made the best out of it.
So how did the blackout ignite your passion for travel?
I don't know that is what ignited my passion for travel, but I think it definitely provided me with some tools to be able to problem solve and to be able to be self-sufficient in an environment where not communication, well, essentially communication in terms of cell phone and things like that were very limited. So of course, if I'm traveling by myself at the age of 14, I think that the ignition of desiring to travel, I think, was already present. And that just, again, was something that helped me overcome obstacles. And I got to learn a lot about what to do in certain situations that way. And it helped me, again, be more self-sufficient and be able to, at a young age, moving forward, being able to tackle some of the things that happen when you travel that are inevitable, right?
So as you mentioned before, as you just said, I want to know, are there any safety concerns when you're traveling, especially in the world we live in today?
I think that there's always, you always have to be careful. You have to have a mindful eye, and you have to not put yourself in situations that are compromising. But I think that if two people look at a situation, one person can see the bad and the other one can see the good. So I think that whatever you choose to focus on, you would see more of. And for me, I'm always somebody that's optimistic and is trying to find the positive out of every situation. And in terms of safety concern, I never had or was faced with something that I thought was bad in any way, shape, form, or capacity. I also don't put myself in those situations.
Me as a person, I haven't been a lot of places. I've been outside the country on a cruise to Mexico. I've been to California. I've driven from California to Alabama and back. But I would really like to venture out and see, other countries, other cultures. And I think that's something that you have that I might be passionate about. So what are some of your favorite locations that you visited?
Some of the places that I really liked were Australia was definitely one of them. Croatia was a fantastic experience. I had the opportunity to stay within castle walls. So I was in a castle while my time in Croatia, which was really neat. I would also say Switzerland was breathtaking too. So those are all places that I thought that were really, really good. And Europe as a whole was stunning. Every country had or brought different attributes and qualities to its own.
So what are some of the most unique foods you've tried?
I probably have to say foods that are typical of the country itself. So what are some of the most unique ones? If I talk about states, then I go back to Alabama. That's like alligator on a stick. That's very unique. When I talk about travels outside, some of the cheeses that were in Switzerland and some of the other like typical foods. I think that like when I went to Greece, it was more seafoodish, like, I think it's just different. Whatever is a staple of the country, I always try to try it.
So I read on your website, aside from reading and writing, you've also listed hiking and rock climbing as being some of your hobbies. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I just am somebody that loves to be outdoors. I love just exploring. So rock climbing is something that I've done throughout my growth, and I enjoy doing it. If I can't do it outdoors, I will do it in an inside gym. About hiking, I mean, I think that that's one of the best ways to be able to explore a country if it's an outdoorsy country, because you get to see some of the landscape firsthand and you get to experience what the locals sometimes have the privilege of experiencing as well. So it's just something that I really enjoy, getting fresh air in my lungs and to see the scenery for myself.
And I think that's a kind of a release. We all have our things that we do, that our hobbies that we like to do, and yours would be hiking and rock climbing. Mine might be video games and working out. So now I kind of want to transition. Today we have with us Tighe O'Sullivan from the first interview. I would like to welcome him to the show. So, hi Tighe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Really happy to be able to join the two of you today. Louise and I have a nice little history and cooperation, trying to support many of her efforts, and being able to be here and continue to do so is quite an honor. And it's always fun to hook up with you, Corey, and talk shop. You've been doing a great job for us. I'm super stoked by everything you're doing for the beach soccer community. So, I'll be here. I'll ask some questions and then, see how we go. I'm excited.
So, Tyler, let me ask you before we really get into this. What's your connection with Louise?
Well, Louise was actually introduced to me as part of the women's Norcal team, which helped found. And when we were seeking players that were interested in making the conversion, a few of the girls on the team had been recruiting her as she'd been a coach out here in California. And she came out and the sport fit her like a glove. She quickly moved into a situation of being one of the top elite players within our group. Played at an incredibly high level. We were together in Alanya, Turkey, and had a few moments obviously in leading up to that as well. And then I've kind of made it a mission of mine as I helped with the notoriety and the creation of the U.S. women's national team here. I'm now dedicated to her in helping support her efforts in having it seen and understood as a great option for the Canadian National Federation as well. So as in this podcast, reaching out to her to get her involved in this podcast, that was one of the directives and one of the things that I felt I was being able to help our little venture forward.
And you mentioned to me as we talked before this interview and before we even got Louise, contacted Louise, that this would be a very fun interview. And so far it has been a very fun interview.
Yeah, she's an enjoyable person. You can't really, peg her. We're kind of two minds from the same heart sort of thing. Both of us have a tremendous amount of background in regards to travel and experience of that nature, which really kind of changes someone's mentality. She's a writer. I love to write, whereas she had the time to actually do it. I've got like 3 books in my head that one day maybe I'm going to be asking her for the help on how to take the steps that she's done. So two like minds always in support of each other is a beautiful thing, and makes things like that much more enjoyable when you're around people that kind of charge your batteries in that way. So I knew that she was going to be a great interview for you, and I can already see that you guys have got that chemistry going already. So I'll contribute as I can, but you guys are doing a great job, and looking forward to seeing how this all turns out on the flip side.
Well, Ty, we thank you for joining us, and feel free to chime in whenever you feel like it. Whenever you want to chime in, just let us know, and that's okay.
Fantastic.
So, Lou, they call you the first female beach soccer player in Canada. Can you tell me in the audience how that came to be?
Yeah, so that was a little bit interesting, and it was a great honor. I think I don't know that I'm the only female Canadian beach soccer, but I think Beach Soccer Worldwide recognized me as the first Canadian female beach soccer player, because we're competing, a lot of our country is under the snow often, and hockey is a bigger sport, and there's all these other things. And of course, beach soccer is a growing sport in the US, and Canada's always kind of just a little bit following suit. But for me, having the opportunity to play under the Norcal name and being exposed to the sport, I got to compete in Alanya, which that was my real first exposure to beach soccer worldwide as an entity. And I think that the story as to how I got from where I am in Canada to beach soccer in Turkey is a very peculiar one. And Beach Soccer Worldwide kind of picked up on that, and from that they were able to recognize me as the first female beach soccer player, which was a phenomenal honor for me. And hopefully there'll be more to come as well.
And that article is linked on your website. Is that correct?
The article, yeah, there is a link to that article on my website as well.
So if anyone wants to go check that out, it's on her website that we did mention before.
Yeah.
And we'll probably link that down below the YouTube video or on the podcast.
Sure.
So how did you train for beach soccer in Canada during the winter? That's
That
two. That's
that
two.
is a $1 million question.
Too
Okay.
much.
So yeah, so how I got into beach soccer is super interesting because I transitioned. I was playing WPSL in California, and I transitioned, and I went to this futsal tournament and got recruited into futsal. And I never really played futsal before, but I decided to take the opportunity. Sure, let's go, new challenge, let's do this. And by playing on that futsal team, I met some beach soccer players. Janae Sensory Warp is one of them, and Luisa Meza was another. And we got to play and compete together, and we got to know each other. And they were telling me about their beach soccer experience and what beach soccer was. And I never heard about it before, but they asked me, they kind of like, not coerced me by any means, but they asked me a couple of times if I wanted to come try out. And at first I was kind of close to it because I didn't even know what it was. And, you're not sure, but they were like, yeah, just come out, you're fast on the futsal court. I'm sure you'd be able to manage well. And I was like, you know what? Sure. Let's go. So I went to not a tryout, but just a practice with them and a couple of other players. And, I did well. I thought I did okay. It wasn't great by any means, but, trying to figure out and maneuver my way into the technique. And they said to me, I think you can compete. I think you have the speed. I think, all these things. And we have a tournament in 6 months in Alanya, Turkey. Do you want to go? Well, having an affinity for travel, I was like, ding, ding, ding. I want to go to Turkey. I've never been before. So I was like, let's do this. So then what was interesting is I had to come back to Canada. And this was early or late January, early February. So surrounded by snow. How do I train at a sport that I've never played before in an environment where sand is necessary to be able to succeed? And I don't have any of that. So instead of just saying, oh, it's impossible and accepting that as a statement, I started asking myself different questions like, how can I make this possible? How can I do this? How can I do that? And then I came up with the idea of creating a sandbox. So then I asked my dad to help me with this project, and we created a 4x8 sandbox. So we took a piece of plywood and, built some walls around it, and that was our sandbox. So then that was the first problem solved. But second problem was, where do you get the sand? Because it's under the snow, it's under the beach, it's at the beach, it's frozen, all these things. So I was like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. So I think I did all the local stores here trying to buy bags of sand, but I figured out really quickly that it's not a hot commodity during Canadian winters. So then I was like, okay, there's got to be another answer. There's got to be something else. And I thought about it and I was like, well, wait, there's a local cement shop here and you need some sort of sand mixture to be able to mix something to create cement. So loaded a bunch of buckets in my dad's truck and we went knocking on their door and asked if we could buy sand. And they said, sure. So we took the shovels and we actually went and we broke the top ice layer of this big mountain of sand, and we packed in as much sand as we could into those buckets and we filled my box. So that's how I actually got to train in that 4x8. So what I would work on was work on my flicks to my thighs. I was able to just kind of have a feel for the ball as it traveled in the sand. Sometimes I would ask my sibling or my parents to come out and throw the ball at me so I could juggle the ball and send it back to them. And there's even a time I remember where, the sand was actually so cold, I had a hot bucket of water next to it. And I would just practice as much as I could until my feet couldn't handle anymore. And I would hop into the hot bucket of water and then warm my feet up, dry those out, and then go back in, so I could go in increments and train, because the weather here sometimes is a little unforgiving. So that's kind of how that all happened. And then I would send my videos into Janae and she would help correct my technique and be like, oh, fix this or try that, or yes, this looks great, this doesn't look as good. And then with that feedback, I was able to correct, tweak, and not perfect because I'm still working on it, but definitely improve, I would say, my technique. Went back to California, trained for a month under the sun and the real sand, and then ready to go to Turkey. And I was able to perform at the international level.
I think being the first in anything is really a tremendous honor. And it's the world has been around so long, it's hard to keep doing first. And somehow you found the presence to do it again. And that perseverance you showed, building a sandbox in the snow, who thinks of that, that's tremendous perseverance. And I really do commend you for that. So how do you think that perseverance transfers into your playing style and other areas of your life?
Well, I think that just serves in a lesson of itself, being able to problem solve. And the perseverance got me to the international plane and had an experience that, some people can only dream of. And I think that by embracing that and embracing the fact that, if we're asking ourselves the right questions, we're able to overcome obstacles, and with perseverance that we can make things happen. It's enabled me to just kind of adopt that as part of my life motto. And, I'm encouraging and want to inspire more people to do the same, because really, if we really desire a thing, I think we're able to reach it. But that perseverance is going to be a key factor, because sometimes the elements are not working in your favor, and sometimes circumstances are not working in your favor. But if you ask yourself the right questions, you're able to find a way to be able to maneuver through those obstacles and ultimately get what you want to achieve in some way, shape, or form.
I would like to think that you can apply that to any part of your life, whether it's injuries, you not getting a job, or you not getting in school, you fell in a class. You keep going no matter what. And I can really resound with that, because I really believe that perseverance is really important in someone's life.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a universal attribute. I think all of us agree on that. I mean, it's like, you get through the hard times, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's something about you, Louise, that I definitely have noticed. The fact that we can all relate to it, kind of, there's cliches for reasons, and because there's there's at least some truth and reality to it.
Sure. Yeah. But I think a lot of times, like, perseverance is something that an attribute that people think that you need to be born with, but you need to develop it, right? It's kind of like with the correct attitude and the correct mindset. These are all things that we can develop. So it's not something that you're born with. You just have to work at it.
Absolutely. Because I mean, the thing is that it's sort of like, going through the hard times in your life is what kind of creates that environment that makes you face I guess, lack of a better word, the objections or the barriers that you have to persevere through. I mean, if you don't have difficulties in life, maybe, you don't have that sort of perseverance, because things are handed to you. But when we're having to go through life, normal people have things that are difficult. And, even, from your very early on age, in regards to the Blackout, I mean, that was a serious lesson in perseverance at a very young age, allowing you to, set sort of a foundation. I think we all have our own different types of foundations, whether, maybe a kid's bullied in school and then comes out, smart and stronger from it, or in your case, the multiple opportunities you've had to travel. I know that perseverance for me has come from multitude of areas, but travel has been one of those, because you're in a foreign land, you don't speak the language, and you got to survive enjoy it.
That's right. Yeah. But I think there's a story that kind of resonates with that, and I want to share it really quick, because you're talking about like adversity and things that make us grow, and but I was reading something, I think, and it was somewhere, I'm not sure where, don't quote me on it, but they created this environment where it was a big bubble, and they grew these trees, and the trees grew with all the perfect environment, the sun, they created all of this like synthetically. And what happened was the trees would go really, they would grow really high, and then after a point they would just fall over. And then they couldn't figure out why. And the reason why is, after a little bit, they realized that because there was no wind enough to strengthen the roots that was at the bottom of the tree. So it didn't make it sustainable, right? So it's the same. So I think we need to have adversity in life to be able to grow roots and grow stronger, for us to be able to apply those things into our lives.
Nice analogy, but one of reality, which is nature shows itself in true form.
That's right.
I agree. I think adversity at a young age creates the foundation which you build upon your life, and it shows when you grow up.
Say that question again. Sorry.
Oh no, it wasn't a question.
Statement. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Then yes, I heard that. I was like, wait, what? Did I miss something?
No, you're fine. So you kind of mentioned this a little bit before. How was your transition from the grass game to the sand?
I think it was easy in the sense of falling in love with the sport. I think that that's a big factor. It's for some people, and some people think it's really, really hard. But for me, I just enjoyed the challenge. And I think that the environment that beach soccer is played in terms of, the atmosphere, the culture, the people they get to meet. I mean, if you think about it, we get to travel and we play on all the nicest beaches around the world. I mean, this is something that anybody can kind of like grasp and run with, right? So my transition in terms of physically it was a challenge, of course, because now you're running in an area where there's no, there's so much give to sand, so you have to work harder in terms of like explosiveness, but it's not as hard on the body in terms of impact. Like futsal, I thought was harder on the body because you're running on this hard surface and it's like pounding, and you're able, you can get used to it, of course, but I think that was an easier transition physically in terms of like impact on the body. But it was a challenge also physically now, because now you're having all these different elements and the way the ball moves and, your technique, as opposed to grass soccer, you're always on the ground more so. They're telling you play on the turf, and here it's more in the air. So a lot of like little minor technical adjustments, but in terms of like being able to play physically, for me, I mean, there was an adjustment period like everything else, but the transition was smooth.
And we talked about that a lot, the effects grass soccer has on your body a lot during Ty's interview. And so and Ty can speak to that and the beauty of playing beach soccer. So Ty, can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, sure. And, it kind of speaks to what Lou was just saying. It's in regards to the impact on the body. One, more than anything else is, we've seen, going back to what we talked about in that first session, the empirical evidence that's come out of Western Australia University showing that, you get shape and 2.5 times faster on the sand. Your ability to build resistance to injuries by working all little aspects of all the little tiny muscles and tendons in your body that contributes to a more solid structure in your body, which we talked about regards to even Walter Payton with the Chicago Bears back in the day, spending his summers in the sand, and him attributing that to never having an injury and playing every single game that he played of his career in the NFL. What we've also found with beach soccer, one, it's technically superior, and I say that just because everything is played in the air. We always want to talk about making the grass game simple. It's like they say, soccer is a really easy game made complicated by those who play it, and that's like making it more complicated. So all coaches are in the mindset of creating a simplified game, which in reality is trying to play it on the ground, whereas beach soccer, as it's pretty explicit about, is mostly played in the air. So we've got the aspect of it, improving our body while all at the same time improving our skill level with different types of skill sets that are needed, but can translate right back to the grass. I mean, everything that we learn in the sand, we can do on the hard surface. Just the people that have never played in the sand, they can't do it. So because you just can't learn it on a hard surface. So it's really interesting to see now more and more people. Past week, I was at Soccer X, and I was actually surprised to find the people that I was able to speak with that spoke to this. The fact that many of the best players in the world all grew up playing barefoot, and that's what we do with beach soccer. And one of the best teachers of the game in the ways of scoring, he'll remain nameless at this time, but he was explaining to me that he takes all of his players, whether it's a U.S. women's national team player who he worked with, Carly Lloyd, and numerous other players, and gets them down to the barefoot, because that's where you find the fundamental skill and technique that's needed to strike a ball correctly and powerfully. So, yeah, I mean, I'll go a little bit too much into this. This is Lou's time. But
you can find that information in our first interview too, if you want to go back and look, because Ty really discussed in depth what he's saying, reiterating now.
Episode 1, reiterating episode 1 to supplement Lou's here. But yeah, I mean, it's just beach is such a wonderful opportunity for players and coaches now, because the reality is that it one day will be recognized as an accelerant to player development. Getting younger players involved in this is going to give them the opportunity of addressing the ball in ways that coaches just are not doing. And there's so many dinosaurs out there at this point that are sticking with sort of a boxed idea about this game having to be played between four white lines on a green pitch. And as someone who's coached grass for over 30 years, I've done, Olympic development, and regional, scouting and so on and so forth. I can easily attest to the fact that, people like Lou getting involved in the game and being able to also increase the life of their career. Not saying that Lou's old by whatsoever in means, but you've got guys playing in their 40s. And, we got a couple girls that are playing on our team that are getting pretty close to that age. And they're playing at an international level and competing against girls almost half their age and balling. It's brilliant because since it's not so hard on your body, you can play a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you agree with that, Lou?
Yeah, I would definitely. I'm still young in the sport and growing, but I think my body feels
Long
good.
career.
So exactly. I still have many years ahead for sure. That's the plan.
Waiting for that Canadian national team to come.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's really interesting, Todd, that you said that players are starting to play into their 40s in beach soccer. You just don't see that in the sport world, especially across football, basketball, baseball. You're not seeing anyone play. Tom, you do have your once in a lifetime talent that's playing at 40. Tom Brady is playing till he's 40, but it's
playing in the Super Bowl today.
But you just don't see a lot of athletes playing until they're 40 years old. You just don't see it.
So some of the best players that we've seen at the international level for beach soccer have been Brazilians playing like into their mid 40s, still getting recognized. There was a Brazilian that was in Oceanside just 2 years ago that got, well, actually he didn't get player of the tournament, but probably deserved it. I think he was 47 years old.
Wow.
And just a baller, just balling, just making it look so simple. And it was, when I found out he was old, he was actually older than me at the time. I was like, there's something wrong here. I missed out. But yeah, it's fantastic to see. It gives me goosebumps to think about the longevity people can have. And, with somebody in Lou's situation, things don't have to happen immediately because, she can play like more than another decade. And, being the type of discipline she has as an individual that I've seen, she's going to be around for a very, very long time and be part of the engineering that Canada's going to have to wake up to at some point.
So, Ty, you can chime in on this too. I want to know, for someone like me who's not really fluent in beach soccer, what are some creative ways to create more buzz around beach soccer?
I think one of the things that has to happen is more things like this, explaining it, cutting up pieces and getting highlights of videos in front of people that may not be exposed to it. We're working really hard this year on the expansion of events. COVID's permitted us not to be chasing teams all the time, so it gave us more opportunity to actually form new relationships and partnerships. We'll be seeing events coming from us this year in Texas. We've started working with the Colorado Rush organization, and they've taken over our event in Wisconsin, and that's a place where people don't even know that there's a beach. I found when we were trying to grow that event, people didn't ever even go to the beach, but now we've got people from all over the state in 4 different Rush clubs that are going to be congregating as a group and then inviting those that they know to come and do it as well. And they're buying into it in regards to player development. We also found this in the Southwest in Tempe, Arizona. We have a relationship with the Royal Salt Lake Academy down there. And luckily for them, their director played in Florida back in the glory days of when it was involved with the USL. So the biggest thing is exposure through the opportunity to play, and for coaches to kind of not look at the sport as something that's fun to do. I think that's that's where things die, is when they don't see the opportunity for excelling their players' opportunity to get better through it. They just see it as, we hear it all the time. Oh, beach soccer, it doesn't really contribute to development. There's nothing that we can really get out of it. But oh, it's a fun time, but we can't take it serious. But the reality is that they should be taking it very serious, because futsal 10 years ago was looked upon as it is now. And right now, futsal, like we've mentioned before, is everybody's favorite flavor about player development. But we've seen, like, even the best futsal players, like Ronaldinho's of the world, that made it so amazing to watch. The skills that he does on the futsal court aren't things that he learned on the futsal court. Those amazing different techniques that he uses are things that he learned in the sand and brought to a hard surface. So it's just it's a time where people have to be able to see the forest through the trees and realize that this is something that's here, it's growing, it's coming, and it's like a snowball going New Brunswick style. That's very small, and it's rolling down the hill, and it's getting bigger and bigger to the point where it's going to be this huge solid mass that is just going to knock anybody over that doesn't get out of its way, because it's something that's going to help internationally. It already is, with clubs like Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. They're all doing stuff in the sand, and you just got to be able to find those people here that are in high level positions that are going to take advantage of it and really destroy the other organizations that are not taking care to understand it, because they will be better as teams and developing players than those that are not doing it.
Lou, do you have any creative solutions?
I mean, just on my end, beach soccer is very young still of course, in North America as a whole, but especially in Canada because of all the other predominant sports. So from a personal standpoint, for me, I think one of the things that needs to be done in order to create more buzz is just more exposure. So the more I can play, the more I can compete, the more I can attend these international tournaments, well, the more we can do events like this that kind of create awareness and show different avenues of where opportunities lie. Because I think a lot of times when we grow up, there's only, we think of one channel that soccer can be attained in, or, we don't really see soccer in other forms as broadcasted or as advertised per se, or as introduced. And I think a part of it is my job and, every other beach soccer player's job to be able to educate people on the sport, kind of like what Tighe said. And, what he's doing through his events all throughout North America is fantastic, because it's not only just, growing the sport, but it's also bringing awareness and being able to marry both the grass and sand together to be able to better the player as a whole. So for me, I think it would just be more international exposure, bettering myself, and then being able to bring some of those tidbits back to, my local community or bigger organizations in Canada that, have perhaps more opportunities or be more open to events of such. So, yeah.
And so now I want to talk about something that's a little more important to you, and really the purpose of this interview is the U.S. formed a national beach soccer team, and why has Canada not followed suit with that?
I think that's a loaded question. I think, I think that's a loaded question. I think what happens with the U.S. is, of course, North America as a whole, like I said, when it comes to soccer, we're behind. If you're looking at Europe, they're light years ahead of us because they don't have all these other predominant sports. Now, in the U.S., the U.S. women's national team is doing really well. There's all of these other aspects that kind of created buzz. Now it's generating different branches of the sport itself, being able to tap it eventually into futsal and now beach soccer, obviously, because there's a women's national team. Now, to just say, why is Canada not follow suit yet? I think is a loaded question. I think that it's something that we definitely want to do. I think that there's a men's team. They're just not FIFA sanctioned yet. And they've been attending tournaments in Italy, and they actually came back and they took first. And so that's creating buzz, and it's generating that kind of like information and buzz. I'm going to use that word again, that to get the attention from the federation to eventually create something where it's fully established, like in the US. So I think that the goal and the idea here is to get to a point where they can be recognized, and then we branch off as well, and we continue growing the women's side too, so that we can continue and eventually create a women's national team on the Canadian side as well. So I think it's coming. I think there's definitely potential, even though we live in the snow. I think we can definitely be a force to be reckoned with if we just apply ourselves and create more buzz and have more awareness of the sport.
And I understand the time vowed to really help you with that. Ty, you have any opinions on this topic?
Well, yeah, Lou mentioned the Canadian beach soccer team, and they actually won our national championship in the last event that we've been able to perform, which is back in December 2019. And not even with all of their crew, they actually borrowed some predominantly known as Norcal players to do so. But the fact of the matter is that they're trying to push the sport by exposing it in the way that she was talking about. I think one of the things that we'll be looking at from them is speaking to the fact about this, this barrier, going back to the words that we were using earlier of snow. And we're starting to see, scenarios across the world where, Russia is one of the top teams in the world and they're covered in snow all the time. So how does it happen? Swiss, they're one of the top teams in the world. Why are they being able to compete when it's so cold and snowy there? The Ukraine, yet a former European champion, covered in blizzardly snow that we've seen from all the old movies and such, and it's really one of these situations where it's like, we're possibly going to be seeing this happening in Wisconsin with the Rush organization, for instance, where they're going to dome, the sand. Currently you have places in Wisconsin with beach volleyball courts where they actually dome it in the wintertime, throwing some heat in there as well, and they're being able to train. So if the time comes where there's investment into the Canadian national team and they can centralize it around one space, which currently is looking like it'll be somewhere around Toronto, and they can create a scenario where they can dome something and turn a profit on it when it's not being used by allotting it to other teams to come in on a youth level or pay like an hourly rate or something. I think that'll be one way to be able to cross over this barrier. Plus, it will be a huge opportunity to blow up social media about it, because we're seeing this currently in Russia on a continuous basis with them training indoors, and they're the hosts of the World Cup this year. They're probably going to be favored. They've won it, and so it's like there's nothing stopping the sport except a lack of imagination and a lack of people, having the imagination to realize how much this benefits. I mean, our contacts, even in Belgium at this point, we have got very close ties with New Team, which is one of the top clubs there. And they're building beach soccer fields with the clubs in Belgium. And for someone from the United States, where we have built a lot of our education of coaching around the Belgium system, and by the way, they're using sand, and so do the Dutch. The Dutch are using sand, and it's like, we've had such an influence from Dutch in this country. The Cruyff kind of 44 model. It's there. We just can't. Again, we're just not seeing the forest through the trees, and time will tell. And I think Canada has a great opportunity to really take advantage of it, because it's such a it's already a unique story that they're competing at an international level, and they've got players that are playing against the best in the world, and all they got to do is kind of put it together. I mean, Canada has fielded national teams. When I was coach of the US team at the 2006 World Cup, Canada competed. It was mostly their futsal team, and it was based out of Alberta, Canada, but things have changed, and it's a prime time. I'm hoping Canada will recognize the opportunity as viable and move forward, because it'll improve every aspect of Canadian football if their players are playing in the sand at a younger age in the summertime when the sand's not covered in snow, and in the wintertime when they can dome some things. And everywhere the problem remains in the wintertime. Doesn't matter if there's snow or rain, there's a lack of indoor facilities for places for people to play. And I know like in Wisconsin, there's these restaurant type bars with beach volleyball attached to them that are fallow from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day. And everyone's fighting for indoor space. Well, there's space right there, attainable in the sand, where their players could just be getting so much more improvement than on a hard surface in a wintertime, and it's not being utilized. It boggles my mind, seriously.
And so it sounds like a very serious topic. How important is the game of beach soccer? How important is that to the country of Canada?
Yeah, it's a tough question because, again, I think since it's a growing sport, I can't say that it's super important at the moment, but that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're here to be able to change that mindset, change that attitude, and bring that value in order for it to become more important and to a time where it gets more recognition, and it provides an avenue to be, again, able to cross train and to just be a dominant sport in the country. Because like Tighe said, we have some indoor facilities, so why not convert some into sand or old arenas that we don't have anymore, that we don't use, or something like that we can create an environment where it can bring revenue, but not only revenue to the country or the organization, but revenue in the sense of growing the sport for the country and for the people that are interested in playing it.
I'm sorry about that. I kind of phrased that question a little bit wrong, but I meant the endorsement of the game is what I meant. But you kind of went into that in your answer there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great.
So it sounds like something that's gaining a lot of momentum. Gauging from y'all's answer, is gaining momentum, starting to gain a lot of traction. And so I want to kind of gauge from you, Louise, how long do you think it would be before you think it starts to pick up?
So I think that's another tough question. I think I would have to correct you in saying that it's gaining momentum a lot more in the US. I think Canada still has some way to grow. I'm going to say it that way. But I think that with, the right involvement and the right exposure, again, it could continue and continue creating momentum. But in terms of years, I could be hopeful and say the next few. And that's what we're going to push for. But I don't think that there is any way for us to really know. I think time will tell. And I think that with the right people in place, with the right mindset, and being able to provide an environment where, again, we're creating awareness and growing the sport and sharing the opportunity, would create an environment where perhaps we can accelerate that growth in that process and see that come into fruition sooner than later.
So, Todd, do you have anything else you want to reiterate about the topic?
Not too much. I mean, Lou hit it pretty much nail on the head. I mean, I think Canada is definitely behind the US. I think the US is behind the rest of the world. It's the efforts like the ones that I'm doing and my competitors and those in the business that are doing it for the right reasons. Get kind of, even for us to get together to help the promotion of the sport in the US in a different way. How it is in the soccer community, everybody's sort of got their own ideas, and it's no different in the beach soccer. But we're trying to kind of create a scenario where we can create an environment that will support the growth of the game by people like myself in the industry of growing the game, can kind of be more on the same page and more supportive of each other, as is the case, which Lou even spoke to, for the overall spectrum of the beach soccer community at the international level. Beach soccer is very different than grass in that regard. Everyone is extremely supportive of each other. Everyone sees it as one community. One country's trying to help another country, one club's trying to help another club, even within their same ranks. So it is a different mentality. And I think the more that we can procure that sort of mentality in the US will help the game grow to the levels that it really needs to. And it will spill over to Canada. As Lou said, they're always a little bit behind us in that regard, but Canada is a place where everybody's friendly, and they already have and I'm speaking in very tight terms of cliches per se again, but they've already got more of a cultural openness, let's say, than the typical American. So I think that it fits the mold for Canada in a way that is even better than what we do and how we treat each other in the US. So, and granted, I'm creating a bit of a box, and I don't mean to, but at the same time, there is truth to that. So I'm hoping that efforts like this, like, talks like this, and Louise and everyone else's efforts, with the Canadian team, they're all able to get on the same page and really push the, turn the dial and put the pressure on. And we have some ideas about things that we're going to be doing as an organization up there that kind of help push that along, which when the time comes, we'll announce. But it's a global effort to grow the game. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we're focusing on our homes, whether it's, well, in this case, let's just call it North America, and that includes Mexico. And, we want CONCACAF to be a major dominant player in this. And so far, the best anyone's done from CONCACAF was Mexico in, I think, 2008, and they made it to the semifinal of the World Cup. And we want to see more attendance at those higher levels from players and teams from CONCACAF. And I think we have a great opportunity with the U.S. women's team. Francis is doing wonderful things at this time in getting more players, both on the men's and the women's side, to create a larger pool of players and more of a welcoming opportunity and attitude than has been there for a decade. So I'm excited, and I'm here more for Lou's endeavors than anything else, and I want to see Canada like be on the stage with the US and put us on our toes and challenge us to do better, because right now all we have is Mexico, and granted they push us plenty fine, but let's bring it all together and make this the world's game, or one of the world's game, as part of the beautiful game.
So Lou, we talked about sections of your life. We talked about your writing. We talked about your life outside of soccer. We talked about you as a player. And now I want to transition to the last part of our interview is you as a coach. So would you say that coaching is a passion of yours?
I think I would say so, yeah, in terms of like being able to teach and teach life lessons through the medium of the sport, I think would definitely be a better overarching passion of mine. Yes, I would say so.
And so I think that a lot of times people can group the two together, coaching and teaching. A lot of coaches aren't good teachers, and can you kind of explain that?
And I think that's an interesting question, because everybody has their own different style, right? So what I deem not good can be good for somebody else. And I think that everybody in the world of soccer, as being a coach, has a place. I think that there just needs to be continual growth and development. And I think that if as a coach, your best interest is to be able to serve your players to the best of your abilities, I think that you as a person also need to grow to be able to better impact them as players. And it's not necessarily just about the game. Yeah, the game, especially the youth level, is super important. But what lessons can we teach them, and what tools can we provide them to not only be good players, but good people in the community? And that's always been my coaching philosophy. And that's what I try to instill in my players as well.
And so part of that is, you say that players should focus on effort and progress. Why is that when we live in a society that is so win-oriented? And Tom, kind of want to, after I hear Lou's answer, I want to hear your answer too.
Yeah, I think that, just like you said, it is a societal mentality. We have learned that we think that we've associated winning with good. And I think that that's a double-edged sword, because although there is pros to winning, I think there's plenty lessons to be learned in also losing. And I think that sometimes we associate losing with being a person. I lost. I'm lost. I've done this. I failed. But we don't differentiate between I failed and failure being an event, not a person. And I think that that's an interesting concept too, because I think it's a flip side of the coin. You can't always win, and you're not always going to lose, but there's always lessons to be learned in both. And if you cannot be at a place where you're learning from your growth as somebody that lost game, then how are you going to be able to understand and receive your responsibility as somebody that's won. You can be great winners. It's super easy to be great winners, but it's hard to lose. So I think that builds character. And I think that like, we're just focused on that because we attribute so much good to it, and nobody really likes to lose, and parents don't like to lose, and coaches don't like to lose because they associated the loss with their own personal self. I lost it for the team. We hear it all the time. Well, there are lessons again to be learned in both sides, and I think that both of them bring an equal value, and you wouldn't be able to celebrate as much with the good if you don't experience the bad. That's why it's there. You lose, but then it feels so much better when you're experiencing the good, right? And if you would just win all the time, then you wouldn't be able to differentiate what's good and what's not. So,
and I think that goes to say, like, if you build the person outside of the player, you build that character, and make sure those players are intrinsically motivated and not extrinsically, like the motivation to win, then they'll have what it takes.
Yeah, I think so. But I think they also need a balance of both. I can extrinsically motivate them, but really where I get them is their intrinsic motivation. So when they fall in love with the sport, and they fall in love with the growth, and they fall in love with the obstacles and being able to problem solve and overcome them, then my job as a coach becomes easier, because now we can use those lessons to be able to translate that with the game of soccer onto the field. So I think there definitely needs to be a marriage of both intrinsic and extrinsic, because as a player myself and as a coach myself, I mean, I have both. There are things extrinsic that do motivate me. I like traveling and be able to play on, beach soccer on all these awesome beaches. Like, that's an extrinsic motivator. But internally, I have to be motivated enough to do the do, and to be able to train in the snow and below, ungodly weather, and to do these things. And that comes from inside. That doesn't come from outside. So I definitely think there needs to be a balance of both.
Todd, do you have any opinions on this philosophy?
Well, yeah. I mean, this goes back into the reason why I got into coaching, like as a teenager. From my standpoint, originally it was a scenario where I was in a situation in my late teens where I was exploring all sorts of things that I probably shouldn't have been. And I had been part of a state cup, a state championship team the previous year. And, just now I was out of high school, like in my first year of, junior college as it was, and a lot of freedom, a lot of time on my hands. And I was interviewed while doing the World Cup Legacy Tour back in 1994. It was my first adventure into businesses of the business of soccer. We put on a 2-day festival with music, food court, activities, and in a newspaper interview, they said, "Why are you into coaching?" And I always go back to this. I don't mention it very often. I probably haven't mentioned this in probably a decade, but I got into it originally because it allowed me to use time where it was like I had time where I was getting myself in trouble. And soccer coaching gave me the opportunity of not only utilizing that time for something that was different and good, but providing me an outlet to better myself, whether it was discipline or time management or keeping me in a schedule. And granted, over the years, as coaching became sort of a lifeblood for my earning capacity, as I was one of the very first coaches in my community that was actually paid to do the job. As you get paid and parents get involved, and you have directors and politics come in and all of this other stuff, sometimes, coaches lose sight of what's important. And I could say that I was definitely in that realm. I've definitely had moments, I'm a coach that has always wore his heart on his sleeve. I've always gotten more out of players than maybe others that would have expected, many times, not always. But it's really a situation that Lou was talking about, and it's been sort of an ongoing theme during this talk. It's, dealing with adversity. I had a different type of adversity that I faced when I was that age, and I got into coaching, and I was able to, fulfill like areas of my heart, you might say, with the joy of being able to have an impact on people's lives. And granted, at times, I would say even I was lost as a coach in regards to the way that I approached the game. And it was only through other situations that occurred where I realized that, winning is not the end all of end alls. And I've always known that. But when the pressure of you getting paid by a parent that wants to see their child be the next Diego Maradona, or wants to know why the team isn't performing at some level, and you have to kind of walk through eggshells per se to explain to them, well, one, your child isn't going to be this, and that's not what we're trying to get to. This is about obviously developing them as a player in the game, but there's also this aspect where it's like it's more important that we're developing them as people, because as coaches we get these young, impressionable minds, a few days a week when they're away from the confines of the classroom. Teachers have their impact every day, and probably bigger than even us, obviously, but we see them in a form of freedom where they are out amongst their peers expressing themselves as they want to express themselves, not constrained per se by the classroom. And so we're able to see things that others are not able to, and we try to guide them on that path of being able to be better people through what we're teaching them on the field. It's something I think that's intrinsically important for us as caretakers of these minds to always have in our back pocket, because when we have that sort of aspect of winning at all costs, or that is the ultimate goal, are we really teaching the correct aspects of life? I mean, I know that business is cutthroat, and I've experienced it in every way, shape, and form, getting ripped off by partners, all the way to the most positive experiences, which even some of those have come recently. But it's as we're coaches and we have that opportunity of shaping the world around us and providing an avenue. There's no better thing for me than someone I coached 10 years ago sending me a note on the phone saying, "Hey coach, I was just thinking about you. Thank you for what you taught me, because it's more than just about the game."
And
So
I think that's what Lou was saying when she says you need a little bit of both, the balance there.
yeah,
That's really important. Like, winning is fun, yeah, it's important, but I bet you those people who come back to you years down the line are more important than those wins that you got. If the player's saying, "Yeah, you changed my life," that's more important than a win, in my opinion.
nail on the head, Corey. I mean, that's there's no truer statement than what you just said.
And so, Lou, you were coaching in California, correct?
I was, yes.
Are you currently doing the same in Canada?
No, because of all the restrictions of the pandemic, a lot of the things here have been put on hold. So I don't really necessarily have the privilege of being able to coach on the field, but I'm getting to do so through different avenues with I'm a part of a mentorship program where we get to, it's called Female Footballers, where we get to coach athletes or young females on the mental side of the game. So I'm still getting to help them with that realm, but not being on the field at the moment. I mean, I don't even get to play. All the facilities are closed, no indoor for me or anything. I just train on my own at the moment. So.
And Lou, you emphasize making soccer fun. I've played sports down the line, and as we were just talking about, a lot of coaches emphasize winning more than personally developing the player or developing a team as a person. What are some ways you keep soccer fun?
So I think that everybody's coaches or every coaches have their own coaching philosophy, but one of mine to keep it fun is to really get to know the players and know what motivates them and what and build that trust. By being able to do that, sometimes people think, well, then practices are not as productive. Well, I would have to disagree with that, because we can still have fun and laugh and do hard work. And we understand that that work is being put forward or put forth to be able to attain whatever result we decide as a team. So I think that keeping it fun is just getting to know the players, establishing trust, and creating an environment where it's safe to laugh at the right moments, not when it's something that's very heavy or pressing of the sort. But players will know and they'll understand that they're able to express themselves and be more creative. And by doing and creating an environment that is such, then I think it makes it fun for the players, it makes it fun for the coaches, and then we work towards the result that we want as a whole.
And I think that, excuse me, I think that keeping the game fun is really important. That's is a vital point, and especially with young people who played the game since they were 5, 6 years old to now, because burnout is a real thing, and we kind of talked about that in our second episode with Francis. That burnout is real, and you got to make sure that the game is still fun deep down, because that's really why they're in it.
I agree. And I think that as a coach, especially as a coach of youth, if you're able to create a strong foundation where the players will fall in love with the game and they're recognizing and they're able to discover why they enjoy playing, as they move through, outgrow your age group or, something of the sort, they have the foundations and the tools of being able to face an environment where perhaps that coach or the environment is not as pleasant, but the love of the game is still there, and they're able to persevere through that short stint to be able to look for something that's past that and continue on with their growth. And that way, that creates a situation where kids will not hit something that's difficult and say, hey, I'm going to quit because I'm burning out, even though that is something that is very prevalent, and I'm very well aware of that. But by giving them the tools and being able to be open-minded and open discussion about these things with the players, I think creates the foundation of just a healthy foundation for them to be able to persevere through those adversities and to grow stronger at the end.
Well, Lou, I think this was a really, really fun interview, and I really thank you for coming on here. Tighe, thank you for joining on and giving us a little bit of perspective, giving a little bit of us your knowledge and a glimpse inside your head. And so I think you added real value to this episode.
Thank you. Well, Corey, I want to thank you for your time too. And Tighe, thank you for, everything you've done and for your support and for trying to push this forward and helping the Canadian side kind of follow suit. So I really appreciate all your input and your knowledge, and as well as all your help in doing that. So thanks again for
anything for you, Lou. Always.